I was 23 when I moved into the
I can't
upstairs
believe how
unit of her
hot it is
building.
today.
A small
I know, this
one-bedroom,
air
the kind
conditioner
with
is a
walls that held
lifesaver.
on to summer heat too long. The air conditioner rattled more than it cooled, and I used to lie awake at night listening to it fight a losing battle. She was my landlady. Mid-40s, hair always tied back like she hadn't bothered with it but somehow looked better for it. The first time I met her was in the hallway, keys in her hand, sleeves pushed up, a faint trace of paint on her wrist. She'd been fixing something in the downstairs flat herself. No hired workers, no pretense, just her. I noticed her eyes before anything else. They had that tired sharpness of someone who'd lived long enough to see through excuses, but still softened when she looked at you directly. She asked if the AC was working. I said it was fine. It wasn't, but I didn't want to sound needy. My days were mostly quiet. I worked late shifts, so mornings belonged to me. Coffee alone, staring at half-written texts on my phone. I had a habit of typing things I'd never send. Jokes no one would laugh at, questions that would feel out of place, thoughts I didn't have the right person to give to. Somehow she slipped into those silences. It was small things at first, passing me in the stairwell and saying, "Still alive up there?" with that dry edge that almost felt like humor. Or remembering that I drank my coffee without sugar when we bumped into each other at the corner cafe. Once, she asked if I had a screwdriver. I handed her mine and later found it cleaned and placed neatly outside my door, like she couldn't quite bring herself to knock. The attraction crept in sideways. Not like lightning, more like a steady leak. A glance held a little too long. Pause before walking away. Her voice, low and unhurried, sticking in my head after the conversation had ended. One night, the AC gave out completely. The room turned heavy, humid. I went downstairs to tell her, though half of me wanted an excuse just to stand there in her doorway. She opened it wearing a thin cotton shirt, her hair looser than usual, strands falling around her face. The apartment behind her was dim, only a lamp lit. "Figures," she said when I explained. "That thing's been around longer than you." She let me in to look at it. I wasn't exactly an expert, but I'd grown up tinkering with tools. I knelt in front of the unit, pulling at screws while she stood nearby, arms crossed, watching like she didn't quite trust me but was curious anyway. The silence was thick, broken only by the hum of the fan I'd dragged over from the corner. "Hot in here?" I muttered, wiping my forehead. "Still too hot," she said, and when I glanced up, she was closer than before. Closer than she needed to be. For a second, neither of us moved. Her shoulder almost brushed mine. The smell of her shampoo mixed with the faint metallic air from the old machine. I don't know if she meant it as anything. Maybe she was just standing there. But I felt it. Later, back upstairs, I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the fan spinning slow circles. My phone buzzed once. A message. From her. It only said, "Thanks for trying. Come down tomorrow. I'll make coffee." I stared at it too long, thumb hovering over the screen, wondering if she knew exactly what she was doing. The next morning, I almost didn't go. Her text had sat there all night, glowing faintly on the screen, daring me to answer. "Come down tomorrow. I'll make coffee." Could have meant nothing, but the hesitation in my chest made it feel like something. I knocked at her door just after 10. She opened it barefoot, hair damp from a shower, a mug already in her hand. "You came," she said, like it had been a gamble. Her place smelled different than mine. Faintly of citrus cleaner, wood polish, and something baked days ago. She set a second mug in front of me at the table, black coffee, no sugar. "You remembered," I said. She shrugged. "I pay attention." We sat across from each other. The silence wasn't unfriendly, but it had weight. She filled it with small talk at first. The heat, the broken mailboxes, a neighbor who always parked crooked. But then she shifted, almost reluctantly. "My ex used to fix everything himself," she said, eyes on the steam rising from her cup. "Or at least pretend he could. I learned how to use half the tools I own because of him." It was the first time she'd mentioned him. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. She caught my pause and gave a half smile. "Don't look so alarmed. I'm not about to unload my divorce on you." I wasn't, I started, then stopped. She raised an eyebrow. I laughed quietly, embarrassed. Okay, maybe I was. Her smile lingered longer than the joke deserved. Something about the way she looked at me then made me shift in my chair. I was aware of the space between us, how her arm brushed the table when she leaned in, how her foot tapped lightly against the floor. It wasn't intentional, maybe, but it pulled me in anyway. I tried to steer the talk safer. I never fixed much until recently. My dad worked construction, but he never taught me. Guess I was too busy trying not to be him. Her gaze softened at that. And now I rent tools from the hardware store like everyone else, I said. She laughed, low and real. I caught myself watching her mouth when she did. That was when the silence turned again. Not heavy, not awkward, just charged. Like both of us had said more than we planned. She stood, breaking it, and moved to the counter. I should pay you back for yesterday, she said. She pulled a small tin from the cupboard. Do you like shortbread? I told her I did, even though I wasn't sure. When she set the plate down, her hand brushed mine. Light, unplanned, almost clumsy. But neither of us pulled back right away. Just a touch. On the surface, nothing. But it stayed in the air after she moved her hand away, like an echo that didn't know when to stop. It became a rhythm I didn't expect. Coffee some mornings. Shortbread that ran out too quickly. Fixing little things in her apartment that she couldn't reach or didn't have time for. None of it said anything out loud, but all of it lingered longer than it should have. One evening, I found myself in her living room again. The AC had coughed itself back to life for a while, only to die on the hottest day of the week. She called upstairs and asked if I could take a look one last time. I came down with my toolkit, though we both knew I wasn't a professional. She'd made iced tea, the condensation dripping slowly down the glass. We sat at the table while I pretended to think through solutions. You know, she said, tracing her finger along the rim of her glass. You don't have to keep fixing things just to have an excuse to come down here. The words caught me off guard. I looked up, and her eyes flicked away almost instantly, like she regretted saying it. Before I could answer, there was a knock at the door. Sharp, quick. She stood immediately, the change in her posture almost jarring. A neighbor, middle-aged man, asking about some misplaced package. She spoke with him at the threshold, body angled so I was hidden behind the doorframe. For the first time, I realized how careful she must have been. How deliberate every glance, every silence had to be. When she closed the door again, she didn't look at me right away. She poured more tea, though my glass was still half full. I don't think that neighbor likes me much, I said, trying to fill the space. She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. He notices things. I nodded, though I didn't fully understand. But then she sat down again, closer this time, as if undoing the distance she'd just created. The air between us felt different, heavier, threaded with everything unspoken. I noticed the way her wrist brushed the table near mine, the small shift of her knee against the chair leg. You should probably be careful too, she said softly. With what? Her gaze lingered, not quite answering. My heartbeat picked up, filling the silence she left hanging. I wanted to ask her what she meant. I wanted to reach for her hand. Instead, I leaned forward just slightly, enough that the air between us seemed to tilt. She didn't move back. Her lips parted, like she might say something, but no words came. The fan whirred loudly in the corner. Outside, a car door slammed, echoing up the street. I was close enough now to see the faint line of freckles across her collarbone, the rise and fall of her breath. And then she turned suddenly, as if remembering herself. She reached for her glass, fingers trembling slightly against the condensation. Still too hot in here, she said, her voice steady, but her hands giving her away. It was late when she asked if I wanted to walk with her. No reason given, no explanation, just the suggestion as she locked her door and nodded toward the street. The air was cooler after the day's heat, though the pavement still radiated warmth. We walked side by side, the silence stretching, broken only by the occasional hum of a passing car. Her hands were in her pockets, Mine hung awkwardly at my sides. "I don't usually do this," she said finally, eyes fixed ahead. "Walk?" I asked, trying to lighten it. She shook her head. "No. Let people close enough to notice me." Something about the way she said it made me feel both chosen and burdened, like she was offering me a truth I hadn't earned. We stopped at a bench near the corner, under a flickering street lamp. She sat, pulling her knees in slightly, as if to fold herself smaller. I sat too, not too close, not too far. "Do you ever think about how people see us?" she asked. The question caught me off guard. "Sometimes." And I hesitated. My answer felt too heavy, but too true to swallow. "They probably think I'm wasting my time. Or that you are." She let out a quiet laugh, but it sounded more like breath escaping. "That's generous. They'd say I should know better." Her words hung there. She was the one who said it, but somehow I felt the sting. "I don't care what they think," I said. My voice came out rougher than I intended. She finally looked at me, and the weight of it was unbearable. Her eyes searched mine, not for answers, but for honesty. "You should care," she whispered. "Because I do. And I hate that I do." I wanted to say something, anything, but my chest felt tight. She leaned back, staring at the sky. "I tell myself it's nothing. Just coffee. Just conversation. But then—" She stopped, pressing her lips together, like she'd almost gone too far. "Then what?" Her head turned back toward me, slowly, deliberately. "Then I catch myself thinking about you upstairs. Wondering if you're awake. Wondering if you're thinking about me too." The silence after that was louder than any confession. My pulse hammered in my ears. I wanted to reach for her hand, to bridge the space between us. Instead, I forced myself still, afraid that one small move would tip everything. She gave a short, shaky laugh, like she already regretted it. "You see? I shouldn't have said that." But she had. And now it couldn't be unsaid. We sat there, the night air cooling around us, our shoulders just close enough that one lean would erase the distance. I shifted slightly, turning toward her, my breath caught at the edge of words I couldn't form. She didn't move away. For a moment it felt inevitable, the kind of moment that could undo both of us if we let it. The next morning I expected another text. Maybe just coffee. Maybe something less. But the screen stayed empty. By noon, I told myself she was busy. By evening, I stopped telling myself anything at all. For 2 days I didn't see her. No sound from downstairs except the faint scrape of a chair, the muted clink of dishes. The quiet pressed in heavier than the heat ever had. On the third night I heard voices. Laughter, hers, softer than I'd ever heard it. And a man's. Deep, easy. I froze in the stairwell, carrying groceries, listening against my better judgment. The sound made me feel 13 again, eavesdropping on something I wasn't supposed to hear. I went upstairs without knocking, left the lights off, sat with the bags still on the counter until the laughter faded and the door downstairs clicked shut. The next morning she left early. I caught only the back of her, hair down, moving quickly, keys jangling. She didn't look up at my window. When she finally texted 3 days later, it was short. "AC's fine now. Don't worry about it." I stared at the message for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I typed, "You okay?" Deleted it. Typed again, "Want me to come down?" Deleted it. Finally, I just locked the screen. That night, I sat outside on the stoop. She came back later than usual, arms full of groceries. I offered to help, but she shook her head, barely meeting my eyes. "You've been busy," I said, too casual. She gave a faint smile that didn't last. "Life doesn't stop just because the AC breaks." It was meant to sound light, but her tone betrayed her. She was hiding something, or maybe hiding me. I wanted to ask who he was. The man with the laugh. If he was her ex, if he was coming back, if she had already decided that whatever was almost happening between us wasn't worth the risk. But the questions crowded my throat and never came out. Instead, we stood in silence in the narrow hallway. She adjusted the grocery bags, her knuckles whitening around the handles. For a moment I thought she might say something, an explanation, an apology, even a lie, but she just said good night and closed the door. Back upstairs, I opened my notes app and wrote half a dozen messages I'd never send. I heard you the other night. I thought we were. Do you even want me around? I didn't send any of them. The apartment hummed around me. The fridge kicking on, the fan circling air that didn't cool. I sat in the dim light, phone in hand, the unsent words glowing back at me. Downstairs, her light went out. I didn't knock. It happened on a Sunday evening, when the street outside was unusually quiet. I'd been coming and going without timing myself to her anymore. But that night, our paths crossed at the mailbox. She was pulling out a stack of bills, flipping through them with a distracted frown. I hesitated, then said, "Need help carrying those?" She gave a small laugh, tired. "I can carry paper, you know." But she didn't walk away. We ended up back at her kitchen table, the pile of unopened envelopes between us. She poured tea instead of coffee this time. The air smelled faintly of lemon and soap. We sat in silence longer than usual. I could hear the tick of the wall clock, the faint whistle of the kettle cooling. She shifted in her chair, finally breaking it. "I heard you on the stairs the other night," she said, not looking at me. "You stopped when I wasn't alone." Her words hit like a truth I already knew but hadn't been ready to hear. "I didn't mean to listen," I said softly. She looked up then, eyes sharper than I'd ever seen them. "But you did." I nodded. Something in her face softened, then broke. She pressed her palm against her forehead, as though shielding herself. "This is stupid," she muttered. "I'm too old for this. For you. It's ridiculous." Her voice cracked on the last word. I wanted to reach for her, but my hands stayed on my knees, tight. "It's not ridiculous to me." She let out a sound between a laugh and a sigh. "You don't understand the cost of this. You get to walk away untouched. Me? I'd be the one whispered about, the one judged." Her words cut deeper than she knew, because she was right. But I also knew what I'd lose if I let this silence keep winning. I leaned forward, my voice low, steady. "I don't care what they say. I just care about you." The room seemed to shrink around the words. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing slowly, as if weighing them, turning them over like fragile glass in her hands. Finally, she looked at me. "You make it sound simple." "It feels simple," I said. "When I'm sitting here with you." Her eyes lingered on mine. Not searching, not resisting, just meeting. For once, there was no wall between us. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It felt like standing at the edge of something inevitable, holding on to the last moment before falling. She reached out, almost absently, and rested her hand over mine. Warm, steady. Not a declaration. Not a promise. Just there. We both looked down at it, the weight of it louder than anything we'd said. When she finally spoke, it was almost a whisper. "Okay." Time softened the edges. Not right away, but slowly, like the way tea cools in a cup, steam fading until it just becomes part of the room. We never talked about what we were. That wasn't our language. Instead, it was the small shifts that told the truth. Some mornings, I'd hear her kettle whistle downstairs at 8:47 a.m., sharp as always. A few minutes later, there would be a quiet knock at my door, and when I opened it, she'd already be halfway back to her apartment, leaving a mug of black coffee in my hand. No sugar. She remembered. Other times, it was me fixing the stubborn drawer in her kitchen or changing the bulb in the stairwell without her asking. She'd come by later with shortbread or tea, setting it down without ceremony, but leaving just enough silence for me to know it meant more. The bench on the corner became ours. Not every night, not in any planned way, but often enough that the wood carried our weight in memory. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. Once, when I asked what she was thinking, she just shook her head and said, "That you'll never understand how fast the years go." I didn't answer. I just leaned back, watching the flickering street lamp, letting her words settle into me. It wasn't perfect. There were weeks when I barely saw her, when life pulled her away and I wondered if it had all slipped back into nothing. But then there would be a quiet text, not long, not dramatic. Just tease on. And that was enough. I stopped writing unsent messages. Not because I had fewer doubts, but because I didn't need to throw them into the void anymore. The questions I used to leave hanging on my phone found answers in her presence. In the way she'd slide a plate toward me without looking, or how she'd rest her hand on my arm for half a second longer than necessary. One evening, near the end of summer, we sat at the bench again. The air was cooler, the heat finally giving way. She wore her hair loose, falling across her shoulders. I caught her watching me, though she pretended to look past at the street. "What?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "Nothing." Then, after a pause, "It's not so hot anymore." It was such a simple thing. But the way she said it, almost playful, almost remembering, made it feel like a private circle closing. I looked at her, the faint light tracing the lines of her face, and I knew. This was enough. No grand declarations, no guarantees. Just two people, sitting side by side, holding on to a quiet connection they'd stumbled into and chosen to keep. And that, somehow, felt like everything. Sparkles, did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?